Boom. Almost on time. Good morning. Happy Monday, June 10th. Where does time go? You okay, Chris? You look puzzled.
Sorry, no, the microphone was muted
Okay.
on this end.
Cool.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ms. Bowles, good morning to you as well.
Good morning.
Do you want to bless us with your camera or you want to be shy today?
No, I'll do the camera.
Oh, cool. So let's talk about real life real estate, because you know what we're doing, like pretty much in excess of 50 sales a week. So it's 200 sales a month. And there's a lot of things that are coming up and we're getting business in a bunch of different ways. And you scored a good one. One of the things we've been putting, you picked up an expired listing.
Actually, it was a canceled listing.
Even better. So tell us
I'm sorry.
Tell us the story.
Okay, so they had their house listed with a Century 21 agent.
Mhm.
It's a neighborhood. There's 17 homes in this neighborhood. It's very not a lot of people know about it. It's by Safety Harbor. And there's an agent that lives there that typically gets all the listings. But I brought a buyer to that neighborhood a couple years ago. So they have like neighborhood parties and stuff like that with everybody. And so they had listed originally with this agent and they weren't happy with her because she had put her house on the market. And like probably 2 weeks after they did, and her house went pending. And then they thought that, she was just steering the buyers towards her house. And so they weren't happy. And so they canceled. And the neighbor I sold the house to, they said, you got to call Amy and give her a chance. So they called me. And so we set up a listing appointment. And so they were actually interviewing 3 other agents. And one was their daughter's boyfriend's friend. So So I went in and I did my best because I really wanted the listing, of course, because it's a good one. It's the highest one I've ever done. We ended up listing at 965. So I talked about the Zillow showcase. I talked about Century 21 and relocation. And we talked for a good 30, 45 minutes in the house because I'd already sent them everything prior to talking with them. So they called me back a couple days later and they said, we'd like you to list the house. So that was great. They were so impressed with Zillow Showtime. That kind of put them over the edge. And so the pictures turned out phenomenal. They were blown away. Even the neighbor called me and was like, who did those pictures? Because they're fantastic. So we came on at the same price that they actually were listed at. They'd already dropped their price once with the other agent. So we came on at 965. And then we got an offer in 18 days, a cash offer.
Man, that's
from a state buyer that it saw.
Okay, so that's a matter of you having a past client that you stayed in touch with and had good relationships.
Yes.
You were recommended, but you had to compete with 3 other people.
Yes.
That's really important because a lot of times we go into listing presentations and we don't have to compete. Right. So the tendency is not to do or put our best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you had to compete, I'm assuming you sent a Moxie presentation in advance.
Yes.
You showed up, you built rapport, you offered some tools that nobody else had because you played the cards that nobody else can play.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of you. Beating out 3 different agents is just awesome.
Yeah. When we went for the photos, they were like, they kept calling and asking what they did wrong. And one guy was very upset. And he was like, call and give me some feedback so I can feed my kid. And they were like, I was like, I didn't say anything. I just kind of looked at him. They're like, it was very aggressive. And I'm like, yeah.
And
like, we're glad we went with you.
18 days later, you got a cash offer.
Yes.
And how much, you can tell us, how much did it go for?
We ended up at 930, which when we were doing the listing presentation, he was like, Amy, he's like, I really only want 950. I'll do that. So when I presented the offer, because they offered us 900 in cash, I was like, oh, they're never going to go for it. And he's like, actually, he was like, I'll go 925. And I'm like, well, why don't we try at least 935, something different. And so they came back at 930 and everybody's completely happy.
Wow.
They're ecstatic. They actually wrote an offer on a house in Virginia last night and that offer got accepted. So all these parts are playing into it.
Did you get to refer them to the Virginia property as well?
No, I tried. They already had an agent that they'd already lived up there, and so they already had somebody they wanted to use. But I
Yeah.
did try.
So that's in excess of a $20,000 paycheck coming your direction.
Yes, I'm
By
looking
me.
forward.
Yeah. That's so fun. Chris, any comments on that?
Well, I think it's important to note that not every seller is going to tell you the truth. Like I love how they said, "Well, I need 950, I need 950, I need 950." And I hear a lot of times when we're talking with agents and coaching them through that, they're like, "Yeah, but the seller needs this, but they need." This is why it's important to price it properly, because the seller may be telling you they need this, because no matter how much they trust you, they may not trust you enough to tell you what their bottom line is. So they tell you, I need this, and we need to price it here, because they think you have to price it higher to negotiate down, when even still they're willing to take less than that. So we have to get it out of our head that our job is to put it on the market, expose it to the most amount of buyers, which is exactly what you did. Get that Zillow listing showcase on there to get even more buyers out there, impress all the neighbors, impress the sellers, impress the other agents, bring all the buyers in, and then present all of the offers, and not be attached to that number that they said, not be attached to any of that. That was an awesome job. That's awesome. Because you put it out there and you just tell them, I'm not attached to it. Because if you would have went to them and said, I know you said you wanted 950, and we'd be attached to that, and they may still be leaning that way and might not have been willing to go as low. So detach from everything. My job is to present the facts, present the offers. Let's talk about it. Does this make sense? And that was awesome.
Yeah, and the point I wanted to
Yeah.
call out too is, we are seeing price reductions from asking price now. So it's super, super important to present every offer in its best light, because you don't know what the seller is really doing.
Right.
Real life real estate.
Did they receive any other offers when they were on the market with the other agent?
No, they didn't, and they didn't have that many showings either, and that was kind of what was discouraging them. They'd only
Well-
had like 2 showings, and then once I listed it, we had at least 2 showings every week, and then people that wanted to come back and see it, but we had already been under contract.
Right.
Awesome.
Well, now the agent who used to control that neighborhood has got a black eye. They sold their house, they're moving out of it.
Yes,
So what are you going to do to move into that
Yeah.
neighborhood?
I'm there were open house parties. They have
I
like
would take a page out of that study, and that study that was done that shows if you get into a neighborhood and either get in front of the sellers once a week for 8 weeks in a row, some way, shape, or form, door knocks, open houses, mailers, or anything, you can become a more visible face and become the #1 agent in that neighborhood, just based on, because they've seen you so much in a 2-month span. And you've got a great opportunity to do that now with a listing that you sold that somebody else couldn't, got under contract in 18 days. It's under contract now. It's going to close, and then you can continue to still talk to everybody in that neighborhood. You could take over.
100%.
absolutely. I'm the just listed postcard.
Just listed postcard, and it followed up immediately with there's only 21 houses. Can't maybe cost, 20.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Good deal. So from a cancellation to a full price cash offer in 18 days, playing the cards, competing, and beating out 3 different people. That's
Yes.
just I wanted everybody to hear from you today. I'm very proud of you. Great job.
Well,
Thank you.
was the other agent that had the listing, were they from a larger brokerage, a smaller brokerage you did work with?
Century 21 Circle.
Yeah.
It was a Century 21. So you beat out or overshadowed another Century 21 agent who wasn't using all of the tools and everything that they had properly, and actually implementing the way that you did. That was excellent. Very cool.
Thank
That agent was the dominant force in the neighborhood, so they probably got a little bit lazy and didn't
Yeah.
get all their power, and they just expected to get it. And then I highly doubt that they tried to sell their house over the other one.
I don't.
But the sellers
Yeah.
have emotions and different feelings. So that's
Yeah.
real. Cool.
Because I'd actually worked with that agent before, and she was a good agent. So I don't think she did that either, but they were emotional. So I was like, all right,
Yeah.
it took advantage.
Yeah.
Super. Well, I love it. So thank you for sharing. That's really, I know you were nervous about doing this today. You did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I was nervous.
Okay. Chris and I are getting to some deeper topics. You're welcome to stay on, or you can camera off, whatever you want to do.
All
And
right.
I hope you will listen, and because we got some
I-
pretty complicated stuff going on here today. All right. Mr. Reade,
Yes, sir.
we had some VA challenges going on.
Yeah, well,
Blame for things that we didn't do, but
well,
we got
even before that, we were trying to sell a property. It started off with us trying to do the right thing because we were trying to sell a property outright and it wasn't selling for what the seller wanted. So we identified that the seller was a VA seller and had a VA loan, and VA loans are assumable. So in order to create more traction, we offered it up as also as an assumable purchase. So you can assume this loan. The interest rate was below 3%. So it was a very, very good scenario for another buyer to come through. So we started marketing a listing as a purchase this home with the assumable VA loan, interest rates under 3%.
let's
that
pause
was-
here just for a second because I don't think everybody knows that VA loans are assumable.
Yep.
Right. And how attractive is a house with a below 3% interest rate for sale for the same price or a competing house in the neighborhood with a 7% interest rate?
Amazing. It's a huge difference.
Huge difference. So not playing that card, it would be foolish if you
Correct. And
But
the seller,
about VA eligibility first, though.
well, before the seller wasn't wanting to do that at first, they wanted to sell it outright. And this was at a point where the market in that area was starting to shift a little bit. Some of those price points were coming down from where they were, not because prices were coming down. The price point was coming down because the sellers were just getting too greedy and everybody kept pushing. So it had to come down and balance out to where it should have been. So that was just something that our agents did a good job stepping in and making that an idea. Say, now that we're at this point and you need to sell, this is an option for us to market it with an assumable loan. So that was the first step, and we did a good job there.
Yep, we did. And it worked.
It worked. We started getting buyers. We had multiple offers on the property over a period of about a 1 month span. And a lot of them were wanting to assume that loan. And the difference being between the couple different offers, we had multiple buyers wanting to purchase the home with the assumable loan in place. But we'll talk about this in just a second to clarify it. They weren't VA borrowers. So we have a VA loan that the seller has, and we had buyers coming in wanting to assume the loan who are not VA borrowers, which is acceptable. A non-VA borrower can assume a VA loan. And the seller was adamant that they were not going to accept a non-VA borrower to assume their loan, even though they were offering a good price, higher price than what we were really asking. They weren't wanting to do that because of their VA eligibility. So for those who aren't aware, the VA borrower has eligibility, they're in VA entitlement, and it attaches to the property that they own. And when they sell a property, it releases their VA entitlement and their eligibility to go buy another property with a VA loan. If somebody assumes a VA loan, if it's a non-VA borrower, there is no eligibility to take the place of the current VA homeowner. So their entitlement stays with that property, and the buyer assumes the loan with that current seller's eligibility still wrapped in the property. And she was not wanting to release her eligibility. She wanted to move forward and be able to buy another home with a VA loan. So that's why we didn't accept some offers to assume the loan, even though they were good offers. We did not accept them because they were non-VA borrowers, and she would have had to keep her eligibility attached to that property, and she did not want to do that.
Okay.
So then we ended up getting a VA borrower who wanted to assume the loan, negotiated back and forth for a little while, went under contract, got everything moving forward, and everything seemed like it was proceeding very well. In this case, the current homeowner, our client, has to contact their lender. They have to sign an authorization form to allow the new borrower to talk to their lender and release information to them to start them with the process of assuming that loan. So they went through all of that. We communicated everything very clearly. The lender communicated everything very clearly to us. The buyer communicated everything very clearly to us as well, because we were working both parties, the buyer and the seller. We have everything in writing stating what was supposed to happen. The property was going to be sold. The new borrower was going to have their VA entitlement take the place. It was going to be a swap of the eligibility. The sellers would be released and the buyer would take on that property and their entitlement would be attached. We have all of the emails from the lender stating, yes, that's what's happening. This is very clear. We have this, that, the other, and we get to close. Everything closes and we are good. buyer gets the property, seller gets released, seller gets their money. The seller is moving forward. It's been about probably a month and a half, 2 months. And the seller has now become a buyer. She wants to buy another property. She's buying with a VA loan, and she's going through her loan process. Everything is good. She's approved for her loan. And 5 days before closing, the VA package comes back, because whenever a VA borrower goes to get a loan, the lender sends a package to VA, requests all of their eligibility documents and information to be sent back to make sure that they are clear to use a VA loan, that they have all of their eligibility. The package comes back and she has no eligibility, which should not happen. She should have still had her eligibility because we just sold the property. Her eligibility was supposed to be released and she should have been able to purchase. We come to find out that the lender for the sale of her home, when she sold it to the VA borrower assuming the loan, did not process everything correctly, made some major mistakes, and did not release her eligibility. And they actually never sent the package to the VA to obtain this borrower's VA package back stating everything is good to go and we can swap eligibilities. So now what we are left with is a seller who does not have their VA entitlement. It's still attached to the property, which we did not want to happen. We said we would not do that, turned down offers of higher amounts of money to make sure that that didn't happen. A buyer who was fully intending to occupy the property assumed the loan with his VA entitlement, and a lender who processed it and did not do what they said they were going to do. Everything that we have in writing says they were going to do that, and they did not do that. And now
Right.
that's where we stand right now.
Well, no, it gets worse because the seller is now trying to buy another property, gets to 5 days before closing, and they find out they can't close.
They got denied their VA loan because they have no eligibility to purchase their next property. So now
Their loan approval period.
they were outside of loan approval period because their loan was approved. We were just waiting on that VA package to come back, and the lender said, we're good. Everything is good. We are approved. And they didn't even mention anything about the VA package because we didn't think that was ever going to be an issue. She sold her home. She should have all of that back. Everything should be good. The lender didn't think anything of it. He said, we are approved. So 5 days before closing, outside of loan approval period, we get that back. And now she has $4,000 at risk. And so now she has $4,000 at risk at that side, no VA entitlement. We've tried to negotiate an extension so that we could try to move things around. First of all, we tried to swap over to USDA because USDA is 100% financing and also gives you a good interest rate, not as good as VA, but still good. And we tried to swap over to USDA. The home is about, I think it's $12,000 higher than the USDA loan limit, so that won't work. We went to FHA. FHA has the private mortgage insurance that is on every single loan. VA does not, so the PMI pushes the payment up higher. The interest rate is a little higher too. So between the PMI and the interest rate, the payment is too high. Plus she was getting 100% financed loan for VA, and with FHA, it's 3.5% down. So she was in a situation that she did not want to do that. We offered to do everything we could to help her, us and the lender, to be able to help cover some of that to get her in, but the payment was not going to work, and she's getting denied those loans right now.
That is real world real estate.
And we're going through all of this and we're saying, well, number one, our agent is concerned. It's like, what do I do? What did I do wrong? So we're looking, we've done nothing wrong. So just to be very clear, we've done nothing wrong. We've advised, we've put things in place. We had all the proper documentation in place. We have all the communication in place. We are not lenders. You're licensed as a real estate agent. It's not your job to make sure that a lender does their job correctly, because that's outside of your scope of practice. And plus, we don't know what they do, how they do it, and certain things on the backside. And what happened was here's the worst part. The lender for her house that she owned and that was selling the assumable loan, they never sent to the VA to get the package back for the buyer's eligibility. So they never reached out to VA and did that. They closed the file without knowing if this borrower had all of his eligibility or enough eligibility to purchase this property. So now after closing, they sent off the package to VA. And they're going to get a package back from VA that says this borrower does not have enough eligibility to buy this home or to swap VA eligibility out. So he does not have it. He had a foreclosure sometime in the last like, I think 3 to 4 years. And if you're not aware, when you have a foreclosure with a VA loan, your entitlement stays with that foreclosure. So whatever amount of money you had wrapped up in that loan will stay with that. Your eligibility will stay with that foreclosure until the bank sells it again and is able to release that. If the bank sells it for less than what you owed, your eligibility for that gap goes down because now you lost that much because of the foreclosure. So that was one thing that's still there. Number two, he also owned another property with a VA loan. So some of his entitlement was into foreclosure and some of his entitlement was in the current home that he owned. So he doesn't have the eligibility to swap out. Our seller would not have sold it if we had known that, and the lender didn't do their job to obtain that, but told us that, yes, this is happening and we have everything good to go. And when they closed it, they did it incorrectly.
And this is just an all-around shitty situation because, you know, now the seller or the seller buyer person is wondering who's to blame.
Correct. Well, it's what happens every time. Who can I blame? Because it wasn't my fault. So if it wasn't my fault, it's got to be somebody's fault.
Yep. So I told you, shit, I don't know what to do. So I called Tom Abraham, who's an attorney friend, and he answered the phone, which is really cool. Then you and I got on the phone with him, and he was puzzled as puzzled could be. But he offered to talk to the seller, buyer person, and maybe shed some light and maybe write a nasty letter to the first lender who dropped it. But even the fact that they dropped it, it turns out they would have been able to pass it anyway because the buyer's eligibility was tied up in another place. So, I mean, these are situations you just can't predict or understand. But I suspect that a lot of people watching this right now are saying, holy shit, I didn't know any of this.
Well,
right.
Yeah, I mean, just to go through some of the questions that could help clarify some little things. So Lauren said, so they never got a COE. Well, they pulled an initial COE and that's what they used to close the loan. They never got the updated one. Go ahead. What was that?
Certificate of eligibility.
Yep. So they pulled an initial one and I guess it didn't have all of that information on it. They just went with their initial one and that's what they closed the loan out with. And when they got the secondary one back, it was already after closing. So somebody screwed up, somebody dropped the ball and missed a lot of pieces, a lot of moving pieces. How long does it usually take for the seller to get their new certificate from VA? It's a fairly quick process, but that's from what most lenders will tell you, they're supposed to do that. That's one of the first things they do. So they pull all of their documents, they get their loan, they put it into underwriting and they send off for that and they get it back fairly quickly within, 10 days, 2 weeks.
Well, Tanya brings up, does that lender work with the military regularly? When you are dealing with a VA type of situation, you want to be with a lender that is pretty solid on VA loans. Right.
VA eligibility, is it one for all the US? No, so the VA eligibility it's going to differ depending on areas.
Yeah, on the rank too. If you're
Correct.
a ranked person, your eligibility is only this high, but if you're a general or something, it's this high. So, and sometimes it's more properties.
And the loan limit will be basically determined by their eligibility and where they purchase.
Yep.
So does the lender work with military regularly? Well, the current owner was a military borrower. So they got a VA loan and it was directly through this bank. So there didn't appear to be any issues or concerns. Feel like a lot of them don't know what to do with an assumable. I've called mortgage services in the last year and they don't seem to know the process. I think I would speculate a couple things about the VA, about the assumable loan process. One, how profitable is it for a bank to do a loan assumption right now with a 2.5 to 3% interest rate, where somebody's going to assume that 3% interest rate when they could get another borrower to pay 7% right now? So how profitable is it? Not very. So they typically, in my opinion, this is pure speculation. I think that they do kind of hold back a little bit. I think they put that to the end of their list of things that need to get done, of callbacks, of information to give. That's just an opinion because that seems to be what happens with a lot of them. We did pull, there was a document online for VA and it said it was, I can't remember exactly, but it basically talked about the assumption process and what the bank has to do, what they must do for at least for the VA borrower assumption. They must reply within a certain period of time. They have a certain number of days to give an answer on it and provide documentation and do that. So we sent that to the lender because they were doing the same thing to us. They were kind of stonewalling for the first like 10 to 14 days. We got them this letter within a day or so, they had everything back to us. So they got back to us very quickly.
Joe Diener said the VA leaves it with the certain, yeah, when they underwrote that loan at 3% or under 3%, that was a profitable loan for them when they did it. So all they're doing, they're not getting penalized, but they could have sold it for more if they got a different loan. But Joe says the VA leaves it to the servicer if they will allow the loan to be assumed.
But this document says that they must do it. It's not a choice for them to, for someone to assume the VA loan or not. The document that we got, it was directly from the VA. It was what they need to do, how long they have to do it, how they need to reply. And it's a must for them to do that because all VA loans were assumable. It was a pretty powerful document. As soon as we sent it, they got right back to us.
Hey, we got a couple minutes left. Maybe ask if you can send that out. Remember, Amy does a lot of military.
I'll try to grab it.
Yeah. So a couple of lessons learned. Number one, VA loans are assumable, but you want to make sure the eligibility passes along to the seller if they plan to use it again, right? But what a marketing tool that is to market a house if it does have a VA assumable loan at a low interest rate. That makes it a very, very marketable listing. I got an email this morning that you were dealing with over the weekend.
Yes.
Let's just talk about it real quick because I'm going to back you up 100%.
Yeah, well, I talked to him again this morning too in Clairette. So we have a listing that went on the market, beautiful property. It's been on for maybe about a week, if maybe just a little more than a week, if that. The agents held open houses. They were at an open house this past weekend. A buyer came to the open house and they were at the open house. They really liked the property. It turns out this buyer also saw the property earlier that day, a couple hours prior to the open house with an agent. And then the buyer came to the open house as well, talked to our agent, started asking questions. We didn't know this at the time, but through our conversations, find out that this buyer came to the open house earlier. Said, well, if you're working with an agent, I'm going to direct you back to your agent. Said, I'm not working with that agent. Said, well, you did show the property. Can you expand on that a little bit? I clicked on realtor.com and got connected with them and they showed me a property. They sent me another email to go see another property. That wasn't anything I was interested in, but I'm not working with that agent. I want to work with you because they spent a lot of time at the open house and our agent built very good rapport with them, was very, very good at everything that they did. They're not poaching these people at all. As soon as we heard they were with an agent, they tried to push them back to the agent. The consumer pushed back and said, I don't want that person. They are not my agent. I've signed nothing. I don't want to work with them. All they did was answer a phone and I will not work with them. So we're like, okay, so what do we do in that scenario? Our agent called me and said, what do I do? So, well, what is our moral and ethical obligation as an agent?
Well, that's what it is. It's a code of ethics that we're dealing with, which has something in the definition of procuring cause, right? And procuring cause is generally the first person who shows it, right? It's hard to get around that because the agent did find the house and did show it to them. Our agent showed up and demonstrated features and benefits, which is kind of their job as a listing agent. But under the code of ethics, procuring cause, you have to go to a panel and you have to sit in front of a panel of your peers if it passes procuring cause, which it would. And then it's usually an all or nothing game. So it's hard for the panel to say you're going to get nothing, agent, even though you found the house and you showed them, right? You paid the money for realtor.com, you did all that stuff. So
my direction to them was to, let's say, first of all, how would we want it to be handled if we were in that scenario? What would we want to see happen if you were, and we didn't know that it was a realtor.com lead at that point. We had no idea. We just knew that they had shown the property. So said, call the agent, ask the agent. We don't need to involve the consumer in a lot of this. Call the other agent and let's talk with them. Let's figure out what went on, what the process was. If they were working with this buyer for like 6 months, 10 months, a year, then just sympathize with them. Said, I understand they are adamant they will not work with anyone else. I'm trying to push them back to you, but at this point, what's in the best interest of the consumers? In the best interest of the consumers, we should be putting their needs above anybody else's. So let me handle this deal. I'll give you a 50% referral of the buyer side since you've worked with them for so long. I'll take care of everything. I'll make sure everything is good, and then we'll close it out and you'll get 50% of the buy side. That was my first thought. The second thought was they came back and said, no, I saw the property. I looked on it. I thought I was clicking to get the listing agent on realtor.com. I find out I got sent to 3 different agents because 3 agents started calling me right away, 3 different people. So I went and saw the property thinking I'm going with the listing agent. It turns out it wasn't. I don't want to do that, blah, 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 goes on. And I said, okay, well, in this instance, let's call the agent and let's talk to the agent and just see where they're at with everything and say, look, same kind of scenario. I'd love to, I understand they are adamant they will not work with you. So they're either going to completely ghost you and go find a friend to represent them in his deal, and you're going to have to fight that side and you get nothing, or let me handle the deal. I'll give you a referral fee of like 10% or $1,000 or $500 for 2 hours worth of work that you put in. And let me handle it. I'll get you something. It'll at least put the money back in your pocket for the lead that you bought, plus a couple $100 more. Said, I think that's very fair. They're adamant they will not do this. They will not do that. And somebody's going to get completely cut out of this. And I don't want it to be you. So let's go ahead and make this work like that. So that was the secondary direction when we found out it's a one day type of lead. It really doesn't matter. The agent showed the property. There's going to be concerns. The other thought was with the changes coming on in the industry, they buyer brokerage agreements, buyer representations agreements. They were adamant they did not sign one with this agent. We signed absolutely nothing. They don't represent us. So I said, do this, get a buyer rep agreement signed with them. Since they're adamant they're going to buy this house and it's either going to be with us or with someone else, not the agent that they brought, get a buyer rep agreement signed with them. That'll go a long way if it ever does come to a procuring cost thing. That we tried to talk to the agent. We know that there was no relationship. They were absolutely clear. Here's the email saying they don't want to work with this person. We went to the agent because we held up our code of ethics and we offered them something because we wanted to put the consumer first. They were willing to sign an agreement with us, but not with her. So it'll start to go a long way if it ever gets to that point. Right. I don't think it will. I think that, we can have a good relationship. The other agent is probably like, oh, well, yeah, throw me something. I'm fine. More than likely that'll happen, but.
I just thought it was a good issue to bring out today because we had a couple minutes to talk about it. But
yeah. And it's going to happen, let's get buyer rep agreement signed. Let's make sure we're signing those documents when you're meeting borrowers, because this is what will happen. They're going to end up kind of ghosting you, going to an open house, doing something like that. And, we do have a code of ethics. It is our duty to communicate with the other agents, refer them back to that agent if we know they're working with somebody. And they were adamant, I am not working with that person. They just picked up a phone and showed me a home. I have no idea how that worked. Right. So we're trying to balance that out and assist a consumer, but not put another agent to a detriment, and honor the code of ethics.
Joe Diener typed in. Joe actually sat on the grievance board for the board of realtors. We look at the string of unbroken events. It's really called the unbroken string of events that lead to a successful closing. It's kind of hard to argue when they saw the house at 11:30 that morning, came back at noon, and wanted to write an offer at 4. That agent started the string of events, and then they came back on their own without their agent, and our agents did a very good job of demonstrating features and benefits of the home. And they felt really comfortable because our agents knew their stuff, right? The other agent, it's hard to be a realtor.com agent. You meet a cold buyer, you had no, and they're looking at a house you've never seen. It's hard to demonstrate value that way. So anyway, we're over time a little bit, but Amy, thank you very much for your lesson today. I think you did a great job. Super proud of you. Chris, great job navigating that V8 thing. We still don't have a solution.
No solution yet. We're still working on that. Well,
if we get a solution, we'll let you know. Thank you, Kelly. I like that. Good deal. All right. Well, I'll see you at 11, and happy real life real estate.
Happy Monday.
All right.